Hello, Charisse here, and I am answering what are ways to boost team performance only through communication. So, the first thing I say is that you have to have some sort of assessment to assess what your team's communication style is. Because if you don't know your team's communication style, you can't boost their performance through communication if you don't know the communication style. So, I use a tool called the Total SDI, which is a motivational value system strength based tool, and it focuses on communication. So once you figure out how your team communicates, then you build on what our performance metrics are. What do you need to see happen in order to boost that team's performance? And doing that, knowing their strengths, knowing how they communicate, you're going to give everybody a role that's going to help boost the team's performance to where it needs to go, focusing on communication. You get to find out. Some people like to be communicated with data. Some people like to be communicated with verbally, face to face with other people. Some people like, hey, send it to me in a memo and communicate that way. But find out about your team first before you figure out ways to try to boost their performance. And so, again, I suggest the Total SDI tool. And if you want to know more about that, please feel free to reach out to me in order for you to take on how do you boost your team's performance. Hey, Charisse here, and I wanted to answer how do I get myself comfortable enough to quit my job and pursue my passions full time? That's a tough one. I suggest that you do a lot of soul searching before you do that. I actually went through the same thing myself, but it took employee burnout in order for me to realize that I wasn't doing what I was passionate about. So I would definitely take that look and make sure you put a plan into place. I think that that's the biggest thing, whether you decide to leave or not, is that definitely pursue your passions, but put a plan into place. Work with someone, a coach, or whatever it may be, but make sure you plan. Okay? Have any other questions? Please feel free. Hey, Charisse here, and I am answering the question: do managers ever feel so threatened by the success of someone they interview that they refuse to hire them? And sometimes, yes. Sometimes, yeah. There's not a whole lot you can do. That's the person who holds the power into hiring, and depending on what their motives are, it's not a good thing. But depending on the kind of person that they are, maybe probably doesn't happen all the time, but you may run into something like that. So I say if you feel like that you've ran into something like that, probably didn't want to work there anyway. Have any other questions, feel free to reach out.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. I wanted to answer your question about how do you approach your first day on the job when you've been hired to be the boss of others? And I have been there before. It is a little bit of a scary situation to kind of be in sometimes because you're approaching a whole bunch of different people, different personalities, not knowing what their experience was in the past with their last boss. All of that plays a role. So my first day as a manager is my thought process is always about building relationships. Um, I was hired to be a manager. I know I'm going to be a good manager. And so that I want to put over to the side because that's not more important than me building relationships with my new staff. And so I'm not saying get personal and become friends or anything like that, but I think that building trust in the beginning, building the relationship, letting them know why you're here and how you're here to help them as a manager really works well. It brings down their wall and then they're more open to listening to you and open to your ideas and that sort of thing versus coming in the first day as a manager saying, hey, I'm Kevin, I'm the manager, and you do what I say. And that's just it, and managers do come in that way. But that's not the way I would go in. And I would always approach it as I want to build relationships first. And so whatever you need to do to take on that journey to try to build a relationship with your staff, you should do that. And so I hope that helps. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Hey, Terry, Charisse here, and I just wanted to quickly answer your question about understanding that there is a need for the human resources professional. Why are they burdened with duties that were traditionally handled by management? One, I totally agree with that statement. And what I've learned as a consultant going into companies, improvement consultant, is that the first thing that I hear is that we've always done it that way, which drives me insane. Just because you've always done it that way doesn't make it right. And I think that that's something that's happened with human resources is that to me, it starts at the leadership. is that the leadership did not, they stopped holding management accountable for things and started saying, give it to HR. This is my experience. So what I used to see is that, yeah, things that a manager would traditionally handle, leadership, their own leadership would say, hey, give it to HR, they'll help that. Give it to HR, they'll do that. And really, HR is now an administrative function, almost paper pushing, than they are how human resources traditionally used to be a long time ago. So I think that a lot of leaders, managers, and companies are just really scared to make that change. I think they are truly scared to just make that change because they think that it's great for human resources to handle everything, and the reality is that it's not. It just overburdens HR, and they don't really get to do the function that they need to do. I mean, HR should be handling conflict resolution and relationship building, making sure that there's personal development growth. And, of course, there's all that legality stuff that they have to deal with. But, hiring and firing, filling out paperwork, assisting with performance reviews, those kind of things, I don't think belong in HR. So, again, I think that it's just been one of those things where it's been years in the making, and no one stopped it. And so until someone somewhere decides to say, hey, let's re-look at HR's duties and their role and their function and see how we can, give some of that back to management, or create a role that it's more effective for that particular role. But yes, I agree. HR should be handling HR stuff. Have any more questions? Let me know.